Hey everyone, and welcome back to Timeless. Today we're going to be going over Aetherdrift in the context of my favorite format, Timeless. Here's the summary real quick if you want to just click off the video. I think there's only 2 cards in the set, this including the special guests, that really pass the bar for playability in Timeless, and that they're definitely going to be playable, and that is Chrome Mox, which everyone's been talking about, and also Ketramose is very, very strong on its own. That doesn't mean that there are 0 cards that are going to see play in the format. I think there are plenty of cards that I've listed here that have the potential to be role players in the format, but these cards are not strong enough where they're really going to spawn their own deck or cause archetypes to go around them. It's just that if there's a perfect deck for it, it might slot right in. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the individual cards. All right, no, that's all business. We don't need to know about that. First up, Chrome Mox. Chrome Mox is the card that everybody has been talking about in this set, and to be honest, we can't predict exactly what it's going to do to the format. I can give you some general thoughts that this is going to make unfair decks better. Belcher style all-in unfair decks are going to benefit the most, and honestly, I think all of those decks would pretty much go up the equivalent of a tier on the tier list, which is very scary when I think Black-White Belcher is currently a top three deck, right? Would this bring this deck to tier 0? I'm not sure. Really can't say. It would be a bit much for me to make that prediction. But all sorts of Belcher decks would go up, including Blue Belcher. Combo decks that are less all-in, such as current builds of Show and Tell, which play blue card advantage spells, mana drain, sometimes even main deck discard to control their opponents, the more Omni-Tell control builds, are going to benefit a bit less from Chrome Mox, but they will still benefit and get a slight bump up, maybe bumped up half a tier. And what might end up happening is people realize that Chrome Mox Show and Tell builds are going to be better than controlling Show and Tell builds. They're going to start building that. Same thing with a deck like Jund Breach. I don't think Jund Breach runs this as is, but people might figure out, okay, we can make a more degenerate Chrome Mox version of the deck and go ahead and run with that. There are some other fair decks that could possibly leverage Chrome Mox in other formats. Fast mana is usually used in Stompy decks. I don't think we're going to get Stompy decks. I promise you guys, I tried. I really scrolled through all the cards in the format. I'm looking for 2 drops, 3 drops, 4 drops that if you cast them ahead of curve, it really Fs up your opponent, something like White Plume Adventurer and other formats. And really, we just don't have anything close. Sure, you can use this guy to power out an Archon of Emeria, but I really don't think that the 2 and 3 and 4 mana threats in Timeless are strong enough to warrant building a fair deck around Chrome Mox and Uggin's Labyrinth, which are really our only fast mana sources so far. So I don't think it could go into that kinds of decks, but I am somewhat hopeful that it could go into one-ring decks, because what you could do is you can just dump your hand using Chrome Mox, you can get 4 mana a turn early, play the One Ring, and just reload. So I think it is possible that this gets played in Boros Energy with the One Ring, and possible that it helps the deck out. It's possible that this gets played in Bale Merc decks, but I'm not sure. What it won't get played in are Lurrus decks, Psychic Frog decks, Mardu Energy. All of these decks are not going to benefit from Chrome Mox, and I would say they even go down half a tier on the tier list, unfortunately, because of this card's presence in the format. Of course, some of those decks I just named, Lurrus Frog decks and Mardu Energy, they do get to play a lot of the good interaction in the format. They both get to play discard. Frog decks play efficient counter spells. Mardu decks play the white disruption, right? So it's reasonable to believe that those decks could benefit from a combo meta a little bit if they teched correctly, but you'd really have to tech for the meta. I've been talking to guys about how you would tech Mardu Energy. People have lots of ideas for how to take down the Belcher meta. People are saying we could run White Orchid Phantom, 4 copies of it. We run Thalia in the deck. But unfortunately, I do think even with all of that technology, this is going to set Mardu down a tier, and I think Mardu might lose its tier 1 status from this. We'll have to see. Mardu might go to being a tier 2 deck, unfortunately, which is going to be sad. But the Mardu Reign of Terror went on for, 6-8 months? I've had enough time to play Mardu, guys, even though I really love playing the deck. All right, up next is Ketramose. Ketramose is a card that definitely will draw you a lot of cards in Timeless. It is also a card that can slot into existing decks. So currently, some of the best decks that we have include a Black-White Bale Merc midrange deck. So a Black-White 3-drop can slot right into that, and Psychic Frog decks are often opting to drop Lurrus to play cards like Oculus, right? So if you're playing Oculus as a 3-drop, you can also play Ketramose as a 3-drop. And that blue-black deck, which would be Esper in this case, usually is already Esper splashing for Swords to Plowshares. But that Esper deck is exceptionally good at turning on Ketramose. Because you can see all of these cards here that I listed are in the blue-black Oculus deck so far. You're playing Deathrite Shaman as a 1-drop. Deathrite Shaman, every time it taps, is going to be drawing you a card. Treasure Cruise is going to be drawing you an extra card and exiling 7 cards to allow Ketramose to attack and block. Cards like Ghost Vacuum and Unlicensed Hearse are the premier graveyard hate spells in the format right now. That might change as the meta changes with Chrome Mox. People might start breaking out the ley lines and the rest in pieces again, but right now Ghost Vacuum and Unlicensed Hearse is what a fair deck wants to play for its graveyard hate, and that is also exceptionally good with Ketramose. Ketramose is going to draw a crap ton of cards for these sorts of decks, and I can't wait to see exactly what people do with it. Also in Belcher decks, Belcher is playing Solitude, which is another great way to cheaply exile things from the battlefield. It's playing Philia, which repeatedly exiles things from the battlefield. It's playing Dollmaker that exiles things from the battlefield. You can exile your Ketramose and get an indestructible token of him. You know, it's wild. And I believe it would count itself. It doesn't say other cards exiled from the battlefield, so if you do Dollmaker target Ketramose, you get to draw a card and have a Ketramose that you can make indestructible, but it's already destructible. What are you talking about? Dude, reading the card explains the card. Please forgive me, I play Mardu Energy. But this card is going to be very, very strong in the Oculus deck especially. It could definitely be strong in the Belcher deck as well. You would want to warp the decks just a little bit to accommodate it, like the Oculus decks. They sometimes play Cling to Dust, but if you have Ketramose in your deck, you are definitely going to want to play a few copies of Cling to Dust. And I think you can play 4 copies of Ketramose in that unstable Oculus style deck. Like I really do think he is that strong of a threat plus card advantage engine. But it's one of those things that we will have to see. We'll have to play test. A lot of people have had very similar takes about this card, like everybody who talks about, you know, Modern, Legacy, all those cool formats, is looking at Ketramose and says, this boy's gonna draw some cards. Oh, right. Big headline, Divider Slide. Right, so the big headline here is that I really only think there's 2 great cards in the set, right? After that, there's a bit of a gap. A lot of these cards will see play, but they require another deck to exist in order to get play, right? They're not strong enough to spawn archetypes. Like, I think Ketramose is strong enough that you can slot him into any deck in the black-white colors that's mid-rangey, or you could even build a deck around him, right? Like the Psychic Frog, Oculus decks are going to rebuild themselves around the card. So up next we have Transit Mage, which is one that I really do think is going to see play. One of the cards that is set to benefit, or excuse me, one of the decks that is set to benefit a lot from Chrome Mox is Blue Belcher. There's Black-White Belcher and Blue Belcher as the 2 good Blue Belcher variants in the format right now. Black-White Belcher, in my opinion, is a better deck overall. It's putting up better win rates, but it's more degenerate and it more easily gets stopped by free counter magic. We don't have much free counter magic in the format except for Flare of Denial and Commandeer, which are 2 cards that Blue Belcher runs. So Blue Belcher has this crazy weird advantage against Black Belcher where they can just commandeer the Belcher off of the stack. So Blue Belcher stocks could go up a lot. Even if stocks don't go up a lot, this is still currently a tier 2 deck in my opinion. Like, this is a very good deck and Transit Mage is going to be a very good card in it. It grabs both the One Ring and Belcher. This is a One Ring format. The One Ring has been banned in a lot of other formats just because of how strong it is. So the fact that your Transit Mage can get it is very, very strong. So on turn 3, when you play your Transit Mage, you can decide, do I need to play a Ring install or do I want to try to win with my Belcher in the near future? It's also a card that pitches to Flare of Denial. It pitches to Commandeer. The Blue Belcher decks, as they stand, are playing Thundertrap Trainer and Flaggy Archaeologist to benefit from Flare of Denial. So I think this is a card that will very easily slot into the deck, and it will see a lot of play as a consequence of Blue Belcher being good. Up next is Grim Bauble. This is one I'm not sure if it's going to see play, but this is an interesting card to me at least. In the past, Luris decks have tried screwing around with, my camera's backwards, Deadweight, the guy right there, which is just a little enchantment that gives a creature -2/-2. And the cool part is that you can just recast it with Luris, right? You kill something with your Deadweight, play your Luris, kill something else. This didn't really catch on. There's better things to be doing with a Luris, but this Grim Bauble card does remind me of that. The cool thing, compared to Deadweight, is that it stays in play and you could sacrifice it for value later. That could be worse. It means you can't just automatically replay it off of Luris. And if you target something that's bigger than 2 toughness, it won't stick on it and make the power and toughness permanently smaller, right? But it's interesting. It sticks around as a permanent. It gives you upside later. It could be playable in Affinity decks, which we're going to talk about very, very soon. I think it also compares to Hopeless Nightmare, which is a card that I have registered in Timeless in the past to try and prop up Black Devotion. So this is a card to watch. I'm not guaranteeing it'll be playable, but it's interesting interactions with Lotus and interesting interactions with Affinity, an interesting way to make Black Devotion in the format. And also, like, playing this on one is quite good because often your opponent is playing Deathrite Shaman, Guide of Souls, Ocelot, Pride, Ragavan. You know, name all the one drop. Psychic Frog. This won't kill a Psychic Frog, unfortunately. It will just cause them to discard one card. But at that point, you just played Hopeless Nightmare, which is a card that I was happy to play in my deck, right? So this is a good way to deal with a lot of the problematic one drops in the format. All right, this is a cool card. This could also go in a black deck. I'm excited to see a Thoughtseize effect with cycling. I think this could be quite good. We have not had a good Thoughtseize adjacent effect with cycling on it before. This isn't Thoughtseize, it's just artifacts and creatures. And the unfortunate part that in the current Timeless meta is this is a miss against a lot of decks. It's a miss against Show and Tell generally. You could hit something like an Atraxor or a Hullbreaker Horror, but generally that's the only creatures and artifacts that Show and Tell is playing. But it is a hit against any creature decks. It is a hit against Belcher as well, because you can take their payoffs and take their One Rings out of their hand, though you are kind of likely to miss against those decks because they're really just piles of fast mana and tutors. But this is a very interesting card. It's very interesting that it has cycle. The fact that it exiles is what makes it really playable because this is a format where the best mid-rangey creature decks are all playing Lurrus, they are all playing Fleege, they're all playing Baelmerk. One of those three things is required to play a creature deck in the format right now, right? So being able to permanently exile a creature so it does not get bought back by Lurrus, Baelmerk, or it doesn't escape is very, very valuable right now. So I'm interested to see if this does see play. It might just end up seeing play in other formats other than Timeless. Like the modern gamers might sleeve this up and conclude it's very good in their format, but Timeless has some combo decks where this misses, so we don't end up playing it. I'm just curious to see whether or not Cycling 3 makes this sort of effect playable. I think it might. It's cool. Yeah, I just haven't seen this before, a 1-mana discard spell that's good and has Cycling. All right, Dredger's Insight. So this compares favorably to cards like Malevolent Rumble. It's not as good as Malevolent Rumble. All of these Rumble knockoffs are not as good as Rumble, unfortunately. I think it compares similar to Say Its Name. Say Its Name is a card that I was trying in the secondary slot alongside Malevolent Rumble in the Gruul Gift deck recently. We've also played Cash Grab in that slot. And what's cool is all of these Rumble adjacent cards have their own upside, right? Cash Grab is an instant. Say Its Name allows you to buy back land cards that you didn't mill right there, which was like really useful when you want to get extra copies of Shifting Woodland or whatever. And Dredger's Insight now has this gain 1 life text. So it's going to gain you the 1 life when you play it, and in my opinion at least, this is going to end up gaining you a lot of life, incidentally, in the Timeless format. Because like I said before when we were talking about Ketramose, a lot of the really good graveyard interaction is exiling cards one at a time from your graveyard, which is going to give you a lot of triggers on Dredger's Insight, right? If your opponent has an unlicensed hearse to contain you, you are going to incidentally gain a crap ton of life throughout the game. If you have a Deathrite Shaman, you can also use this to gain a lot of life, right? I think this could be good for that particular reason. And yeah, I'm hopeful. I don't think this is going to replace Rumble. I don't think this is necessarily a slam dunk. I just want to point out that like this thing is going to get a lot more triggers than people realize in the Timeless format just because of the cards people are playing right now. Like you're going to gain 7 life a game post board, I think, with this card. All right, Voyaging Home. Voyage Home, I think, is really strong. I think tacking gain 3 life onto a card like this really cranks up the power level because oftentimes Affinity decks are trying to go long and they are trying to stabilize. Gaining 3 life is a very, very good way to do that. I know you can't discount this all the way down to 1 mana, but I still think it's the best Affinity card we've gotten for Timeless. Actually, I was about to say in a while, we just got the Affinity lands. Again, I play Mardu, like, forgive me. I don't know anything about this dang format. This is really strong, though. I do anticipate this propping up whatever Affinity Shells do get made. Affinity Shells in the past were always just blue-black because we have the blue and the black artifact lands, but it's definitely worth splashing white to play this card. I think this is going to be very, very strong. Drawing 3 is also a lot more powerful than drawing 2, as Affinity decks are loaded up with a bunch of like cards that are pretty useless on their own, right? Feels really bad to cast your Thought Cast and just draw 2 Ornithopters, which don't do anything. So Voyage Home could definitely help. And then we have these other 2 Affinity cards. They are not very strong, but they could possibly make the build. Memory Guardian interests me because this is a Flare of Denial format, and the good Affinity builds are playing Baleful Strix, Emery, Tamiyo, trying to like load up on those targets for Flare of Denial. Memory Guardian could end up being another card that you play in that deck. It doesn't discount itself to 0, unfortunately, uh, which is something you want to see for just like a French vanilla creature with Affinity. But again, it pitches to Flare, so it possibly could make the deck. Demonic Junker is also really cool. It is a removal spell that could slot itself into these decks. There's other removal spells that you could put into this deck. I don't know if this necessarily makes the cut. It is definitely one that is like in the deck builder's toolkit if you are going to try to force Affinity in this format. And we have the Affinity lands, like we have the artifact lands, at least 2 of them, not all 5 for whatever reason. We didn't get the red one because screw me. But if you did want to try to make Affinity work in this format, you definitely look at these cards. I don't know if the 2 on the left make your deck, but I definitely think Voyage Home will. Okay, Radiant Lotus. I'm going to sound crazy because usually I'll see a 6 mana card and immediately throw it out for Timeless. But I think this is a really good cheat target for the format. Now I'm going to say something crazy that is akin to just channel, or excuse me, just tutor for your restricted card, lol. But if you cast channel, you cast channel, and then you channel this guy out, right? Pay 6 life for him. And then you channel out a bunch of like Ichor Wellsprings, Chromatic Spheres, those kind of cards out of your hand. And you tap this, and you sack the board. You're going to get like 20 mana and draw 7 cards or whatever. And then you probably just win. I don't know. I feel like this is a really, really, really strong artifact to cheat into play. And if we do end up with like a silly little eggs deck, this definitely could be a strong part of it. Like the deck doesn't exist yet, and it's definitely in jank tier, but this is honestly too strong of an effect for me to leave out. I don't think this is gonna get you to the top of the meta tomorrow, so don't act like I said that, but I look forward to seeing if somebody can break this card. All right, these cards are very marginal in this tier. Bright Glass Geargulk is in the middle is probably the best. So Bright Glass is able to search for 2 creatures out of your deck, just like Ranger Captain of Eos, but it doesn't just search creatures, it also searches for artifacts and enchantments, which means it can get your sideboard cards. It can get Deafening Silence as an enchantment, it can get Ghost Vacuum as an artifact, it can of course just get Guide of Souls and Ocelot Pride. So the card does have a lot of applications. However, green, white, that is a tough casting cost in this format. Double green. Green is the worst color in the format for a while, by a mile, right? White creature decks are good, and there is currently the Bilmerk decks that splash green for Birthing Ritual. And this is a card, yeah, you can Birthing Ritual or Renegade Rallier into this thing and search for Guide Pride. Like, I know, but I feel like the deck slots are all full, man, and you're not really going to be able to squeeze some Bright Glasses into that. But the card is very strong. I do think it could have a home, especially if Timeless does get like some 1-drops that just combo with each other. That would be quite rare. I know we have Guide and Pride, but I'm talking about a bit more of a hard combo where they win the game, or 1-drops are a part of a hard combo with more expensive cards. It's very hard to win the game with just 1-drops. All right, Skyseer's Chariot on the left-hand side is an interesting card. I don't know if it quite makes the cut, but I want to point this out as just like a lurissable card. It is kind of close to like Looter Scooter in terms of the stats. Obviously, it doesn't loot, but it is a 3/3 flyer for 2 mana that you can crew up. It slots into your Luris decks like Energy, and that bit of a hate tax on it is quite relevant against the format, right? It is a card that you could just name Belcher and buy yourself 2 more turns. It is a card where you don't have to be against an unfair deck, and you can name something like Goblin Bombardment and slow down your opponent's Goblin Bombardments. I don't quite think it's good enough. Like, the comparison is the 3 mana card, Anointed Peacekeeper, where you get to look at your opponent's hand, and then you also get to make the spell itself more expensive. I think that's a lot stronger. But this is Luris compatible. We could be entering a really weird meta that is warped around Belcher and combo decks, so maybe this card could squeak into your deck. I think it's one that you could be aware of. I don't think it's necessarily going to make your deck. And the last one in here, the last ride, I don't think this is going to end up being a good Timeless card, but I've played enough Ladder to understand the psychology of like a blue-black frog player. The blue-black frog players are going to put this card in their deck, and they are going to spend a lot of mana and a lot of life drawing cards, and they're probably going to lose the game. What's cool about this card is you can just play it on turn 1 and forget about it, unlike Death Shadow, which is something that it's paying homage to. And it's a good way to artificially lower your life total. 3 life per card is, or excuse me, 3 mana per card is a lot to pay in Timeless, right? But there are definitely a lot of slow blue black decks that are very happy to hold up 3 mana and either mana drain you or draw a card. So this definitely, knowing ladder players, this is going to see play definitely. Whether or not it will see play in a good deck that wins a tournament, I don't think so. I don't think this slots into an actual very good deck. But like, I just know ladder players, their propensity for frogs. I know that this card is going to get crewed by Orcish Bowmaster in the token like thousands of times on ladder, and it's going to cause like psychological damage to me as my opponent decides whether or not they're going to pay 2 more life to draw another card. All right, next slide. I'm already taking psychic damage thinking about it. All right, so business model. Got some artifact cards here. Galvanic Blast is a card that actually does not have to be played in an affinity deck. It is very possible that you have like a red value mid-range deck that just happens to have enough artifacts to turn this on. In that case, this card is really awesome. It's just a better version of Lightning Bolt for those decks. Do those decks exist? No. Can those decks exist? Sure. You could also build red-based Affinity and play this card. But, like I said before, when we got those Affinity lands, we didn't get the red one for some reason. So, probably not. We also don't have that many good red Affinity cards in the format, right? We don't have like Goblin Welder or anything really powerful like that. So, I doubt Galvanic Blast sees play right away, but it is a cool card to know. Whir of Invention on the left. I freaking love that art. I love all the art for the special guests, by the way. They really knocked it out of the park. It's a cool card to have in the format. It doesn't immediately break anything. It doesn't like immediately enable some busted combos, but it is a cool card that I'm very happy that we now have access to. And somebody one day is going to build a really cool combo deck that uses it, and I'm going to be really happy. If we ever get the MH3, or not MH3, was it MH1 or MH2? Urza Lord High Artificer. That card hits the format, then yeah, Whir becomes quite good because that was a modern deck at one point. But until then, it'll be relegated to jank tier, but I really look forward to seeing the jank that people come up with Whir. And lastly, we have Repurposing Bay, which is a card that if it was worded just a little bit differently, I would rate it a lot higher. So it's Birthing Pod for artifacts, right? 3 mana to play it, 2 mana, tap, sacrifice another artifact, search your library for an artifact with that mana value, +1. So you can play a 7 mana artifact for 0 mana in this format if you slot this into an affinity deck, right? Then you can tap it and activate it and search for another artifact. Unfortunately, the tough part of this is that you have to search for something with exactly that mana value +1, so you have to grab an 8-drop. So you couldn't, for example, sacrifice your free 7-drop and go grab a Lotus Citadel out of your deck, which is something that I would maybe imagine myself doing. You would have to go to 8, and going to 8 gets you a Cityscape Leveler. I did quickly look at the cards. But unfortunately, there's no I win the game kind of artifacts at 8. So I feel like if we got a really banger I win the game 8 mana artifact, you could try to like jam a 7-drop using Affinity to make it free, tap this, and sacrifice it. But until that happens, this is not quite going to have a place in the format. I do think it's interesting, and I look forward to like the jank that people brew up with it. All right, more cards that are like close, but they just don't have the support in this format right now. Like all these cards, this slide and last slide, they're powerful. They just don't get there with the current card pool. Riverchurn Monument, that's one of the mill cards of all time. It's a fantastic mill finisher. It's just that there's not a mill deck in the format right now. Market Backwalker, same thing. Like this card's fantastic. Look how many cards you can draw with that thing. Holy moly. But we don't have Arcbound Ravager and all of the good cards to put together an artifact hardened skills kind of deck. Lastly, Marauding Mako. This card's awesome. I'm glad that everybody else who plays other formats has identified this card as very, very good, because once upon a time, we were happy to take a temporary buff. Oh, what's the name of the card? I'm forgetting it. The 1/2 menace that would get +1/+0 whenever you discarded. People were happy to play that card, right? And this is a permanent buff. It comes with cycling itself. There aren't enough discard effects in Timeless to make this work, right? We would need like Goblin Lore, Burning Inquiry, those cards to enable like a Degenerate Hollow One deck to play this. And by the way, I would love to play that deck. I want Goblin Lore in the format so bad. It would be so much fun. But like you cast a Burning Inquiry and this gains 3 counters immediately. It becomes a 4/4. Right, you play this turn 1. Turn 2, you play like Looting Burning Inquiry and this thing is like attacking for 6? Seems pretty nuts, right? So I'm looking forward to seeing people play with this in other formats. Unfortunately, it won't get there in Timeless. Anything else? Oh yeah, Punt Him Like a Football. cards that aren't going to make it. These are ones that I saw people discussing. I think we put most of these in the cube so that we could try and play with them. I saw some people talking about Basri saying it could be quite good. It could be quite oppressive in energy. I personally don't see it. I don't think Mardu energy just needs another Savannah Lion. I understand like you could cycle it to give like your cat, your Johnny, hexproof and indestructible. But I don't think the deck really has the slots to play with him. That's my hot take. Maybe I'm going to play with it and I'm going to eat my words in a couple months, but I don't think that this is going to help Mardu or make the builds right now. I think Mardu needs to worry about not losing to Belcher right now rather than putting in random combat tricks and Savannah Lions into their deck. Voyager Glide Car, again, that's a cool card that we're going to play in the cube, but yeah, it's not going to make it into energy or Lotus decks just on power level. It is really strong though. Like I got to say, like that's a juiced up 1-drop. Like that might be like Smuggler's Copter, but a 1-drop. Like it is very strong, but I'm not seeing it in Timeless. Again, like it's really strong. I think that card is going to get crewed and turned into a non-vehicle creature. What is that? Yeah, becomes an artifact creature. It gets crewed without technically getting crewed. I think those abilities are going to get activated a lot in Standard and maybe even Pioneer, but I don't think it quite makes the cut in Timeless. But maybe people play with it a bunch in Standard and Pioneer and they realize, holy crap, this is like one of the 1-drops of all time. We got to play it everywhere, and then it catches on in Timeless. Unstoppable Plan is really cool, but it's non-land permanents. We don't have any really abusable cards in Timeless like Isochron Scepter, unfortunately. It would be really cool if we had great cards to go with it, but no, not going to be playable in the format now or for a long time, I think. It is maybe possible that this enables some sort of jank Isochron Scepter deck if we get a card like that, but again, there's so many ifs in there, right? Then I saw some people talk about Dune Drifter, and they're like, oh, you buy things back like Lotus, and you could put it in the Lotus deck. And I'm just like reading this, and I'm like, you could play the actual factual reanimate card in the format, and the vehicle part is just like a 3/3, right? It doesn't wow me. It doesn't amaze me. So I don't think this one is actually going to see play. All right, I think that is it for me. Yes, Belcher meta is incoming. I hope you guys are ready. What we got in this format, or excuse me, in this set, is definitely going to help out the unfair decks. We also got a really powerful mid-range tool, but we didn't get Force of Negation as all the blue mages were hoping for, so might get into Belcher winner here. We'll have to see. We got to watch that black-white Belcher deck very intently. I think that deck is definitely going to stay tier 1, and it might even end up being tier 0. But the thing is, everybody knows that. Everybody's going to be trying to beat it. Everybody's going to be warping their decks. People have already been playing Belcher a lot on ladder, myself included, in anticipation, right? I was playing it a bunch at the end of the season last season to make the video, and then I played it more after just because like I was learning the deck and I realized it was a bit more intricate than I thought, and I felt my skill level going up and up on it, and I got like rank 20 something at one point playing the deck towards the end of the season, right? So people are getting their reps in, but people are also getting their reps in against it. Like somebody played Thalia. Yes, Thalia against me as Belcher, and I just lost. Like I couldn't beat that card, which is really funny, right? Because it's a hilariously bad card in Timeless right now. Orcus Bowmaster just looks at it and it dies. But we could see people starting to adopt this technology to really slow down Belcher. We can see the Giga Chads on ladder go basic planes, Chrome Mox, imprint a card, play Thalia. Very based. And take down the Belcher decks, right? So we'll see. The format is definitely going to change a bit because of Chrome Mox. The format is going to get pushed more in the direction of being degenerate, and is how it is. Some people are coping and saying it's going to cause problems. I'm excited at least. This is still my favorite format, so I'm going to have lots of fun brewing in it. We could definitely try to make Chrome Mox work in all sorts of strategies that are not called Goblin Char Belcher, and I really look forward to the experience of trying to brew really powerful decks, especially with Chrome Mox, right? That's it for me. Join the Discord if you want to help brew these decks. Let me know in the comments if I missed a card. I don't think I did. And see you guys in the next video.